There is a kind of defeat that does not look dramatic from the outside. You still wake up. You still go through the day. You still make plans. You still tell yourself that one day you will get serious. But underneath all of that, something is slipping. Your standards are slipping. Your focus is slipping. Your self-respect is slipping. And if you are honest, you can feel it. You know what it feels like to live below your own potential and know it. You know what it feels like to promise yourself more, then watch yourself deliver less. That kind of pain is different. It is not loud. It is not public. But it wears a person down from the inside, because nothing drains you like becoming someone you do not respect. Nothing exhausts you like watching yourself repeat what you already know is making your life smaller. That is where many people are right now. Not destroyed, not finished, but quietly losing ground. They lose ground every time they delay what matters. Every time they let distractions steal another hour. Every time they let fear make a decision. Every time they return to old habits after swearing this time will be different. They do not just lose time. They lose trust in themselves. They lose sharpness. They lose belief in their own word. And once a person starts losing trust in himself, everything feels heavier. Action feels heavier. Discipline feels heavier. Hope feels heavier. Even simple things start to feel hard because now the fight is no longer just with life. The fight is with your own pattern. You know that fight. You know what it feels like to want more and still move weakly. You know what it feels like to be tired of your own hesitation, tired of your own inconsistency, tired of seeing flashes of what your life could be while your daily behavior keeps pulling it back down. And the worst part is not failure itself. The worst part is the private humiliation of watching yourself repeat it again and again and again. That is where people begin to shrink. That is where they stop expecting much from themselves. That is where they lower the standard just enough to stop feeling the full sting of their wasted potential. This is why this matters. Your life is not shaped only by big decisions. It is shaped by what you keep repeating when nobody is watching, by what you return to under pressure, by what you obey when you are tired, by what you allow to guide you when the day gets hard. And if you never interrupt those patterns, they do not stay small. They become direction. They become character. They become destiny in practice, even if not in truth. That is how a person ends up living far below what he could have built. Not all at once, quietly, repeatedly, through tolerated weakness. So let us be clear from the start. This is not for people who want to feel inspired for 10 minutes and then go back to sleep inside their own life. This is for the person who is tired of being dragged by his own mind, tired of making excuses he no longer believes, tired of watching distraction, emotion, doubt, old pain, and inconsistency keep taking pieces of his future. If that is you, then this is your moment to get honest. Not gentle, honest, because you do not need another soft idea. You need control. You need structure. You need a way to stop leaking your life through the same mental cracks over and over again. That is what this journey is about. Taking the wheel back, seeing clearly what has been weakening you, cutting what has been poisoning you, building a mind that can actually carry the life you say you want. A stronger life requires a stronger inner system. A stronger future requires a stronger standard. A stronger identity requires stronger daily proof. That is what you are about to face. Not a slogan, not a mood, a rebuild. So stay with this. Stay with it even if it stings. Stay with it even if parts of it expose you, Because the truth can hurt, but it also gives leverage. And once you see clearly what has been costing you years, you stop treating your struggle like a mystery. You stop drifting. You stop waiting. You start fighting in the right place. And that is where real change begins. Chapter 1. You are not stuck. You are untrained. You are not losing because you have no potential. You are losing because your mind has been running without discipline. That is the truth. Hard, clean, uncomfortable, but necessary. Most people do not need more comfort. They need a more honest diagnosis. They call themselves lazy, weak, broken, unlucky, unmotivated. But what if those labels are not just wrong? What if they are the very reason people stay trapped? Because once you call the problem by the wrong name, you start looking for the wrong solution. You wait for motivation when the real issue is training. You wait for confidence when the real issue is conditioning. You wait for the right mood when the real issue is that your mind has been allowed to drift for too long without command standards or control. You are not stuck. You are untrained. That is the difference. And that difference changes everything. Your mind is not neutral. It does not sit there harmlessly while you figure life out. It is always being shaped, always being influenced, always being trained by what you repeat, what you consume, what you fear, and what you allow to stay alive inside you. That is why your mind is more like a garden than a machine. Whatever you plant grows. Whatever you feed gets stronger. If you plant doubt, doubt expands. If you plant fear, fear spreads. If you rehearse regret, regret becomes a voice. If you repeat weakness, weakness starts to feel like identity. That is how people get trapped. Not because they were born broken, but because they kept feeding the wrong pattern until it started sounding like truth. They say, this is just who I am. I always quit. I always fail. I never stay consistent. But no, that is not identity. That is repetition. That is conditioning. That is an untrained system being mistaken for a permanent self. And if the mind is left untrained, it will not drift toward strength. It will drift toward what is easy, emotional, and familiar. It will drift toward doubt because doubt feels safer than risk. It will drift toward fear because fear feels protective. It will drift toward comparison because comparison keeps the ego busy. It will drift toward the past because the past is known. It will drift toward emotional reaction because reaction is easier than self-command. That is what an untrained mind does. It does not stand still. It slides, quietly at first, then consistently, then powerfully, until one day your whole life starts moving in the direction of thoughts you never meant to trust this much. That is why this matters. Thoughts do not stay in the mind. They travel. They become choices. Choices become habits. Habits become results. Results repeated long enough become identity. That is the chain. That is the mechanism. That is why your life looks the way it does more often than you want to admit. First you think, then you act, then you repeat, then you become. People love to talk about results as if results come first. They do not. Results come late. Confidence comes late. External proof comes late. What comes first is the script, the mental script, the inner pattern, the repeated thought that becomes repeated behavior. If the script is weak, the behavior will be unstable. If the behavior is unstable, the results will be inconsistent. And if the results stay inconsistent long enough, you start building an identity around disappointment. That is how people quietly train themselves into defeat while still hoping life will somehow turn around. So stop using old labels on yourself. Stop saying I am lazy. Stop saying I have no discipline. Stop saying I am not the kind of person who can change. Those labels do not explain you. They trap you. They turn a trainable pattern into a permanent sentence. They make you confuse a habit with a destiny. And once you do that, you stop fighting in the right place. You stop training. You stop taking responsibility where it actually matters. Because if you believe the problem is your nature, effort feels pointless. But if you understand the problem is your conditioning, effort becomes power. Repetition becomes a tool. Change stops looking like fantasy and starts looking like work. Look at the difference. A person who thinks he is broken waits for rescue. A person who knows he is untrained begins to build. A person who thinks he is weak looks for excuses. A person who knows he is underdeveloped starts training strength. A person who calls his pattern identity surrenders to it. A person who calls it conditioning knows it can be replaced. Which person still has leverage? Which person still has movement? Which person still has a future? You do, but only if you stop telling yourself soft lies in familiar language. Only if you stop romanticizing confusion. Only if you stop treating your current state like your final form. You are not trapped because your life is over. You are trapped because your mental system has been left unattended. You are trapped because repetition has been shaping you more than intention. You are trapped because your thoughts have been training you, and they have been training you in the wrong direction. That is the bad news. Here is the good news. Anything trained can be retrained. Anything repeated can be replaced. Anything conditioned can be reconditioned. But not by wishing, not by waiting, not by hearing one strong message and going back to mental chaos tomorrow morning. By training, daily training, intentional training, by taking command of what enters your mind, what stays in your mind, and what gets repeated until it becomes your standard. So no, you are not stuck. You are not finished. You are not condemned to live under the rule of your worst thoughts. But you do need to get honest right now. You do need to stop hiding behind labels that make your struggle sound permanent. The issue is not that you have no hope. The issue is that your inner system has been running without discipline. That changes now. Because once you understand that your life is being shaped by what your mind has been trained to repeat, the next question becomes unavoidable. Chapter 2. What has been running your life? Most people are not living by clear intention. They are living by default. That is the truth. They say they want a different life, but their days are still being driven by old mental habits, emotional reactions, outside noise, and invisible patterns they never took the time to name. They think they are choosing their direction, but most of the time they are simply reacting to whatever has the strongest grip on them in that moment. One old memory, one wave of fear, one comparison, one bad mood, one toxic voice, one distracting environment. That is all it takes to bend the direction of an unguarded life. And then they call it fate. They call it bad luck. They call it who they are. But it is not fate. It is not destiny. It is influence. It is drift. It is a life being shaped by forces that were never challenged hard enough. So ask yourself an uncomfortable question. Have you really been driving your life, or have you mostly been reacting your way through it? Have you been choosing your direction with force, or have hidden patterns been making the real decisions for you? Because if you look honestly, many of the things you call choices were not really choices at all. They were reactions. They were habits. They were emotional reflexes dressed up as decisions. That is the problem. Not just negative thinking in general, but a cluster of invisible drivers that have been quietly running your life while you kept calling the chaos normal. The first driver is the past. The past has been running your life more than you want to admit. Not because it has magical power, but because you keep giving it present authority. You replay old failures and call them evidence. You revisit old embarrassment and call it truth. You remember where you fell short, and instead of learning from it, you build your self-image around it. Then every new opportunity gets filtered through an old wound. You hesitate because you failed before. You shrink because you were rejected before. You doubt because you were disappointed before. The event ended, but the meaning stayed because you kept feeding it. And once you keep feeding an old failure, it starts making decisions for you long after it should have lost its voice. The second driver is comparison. Quiet, constant, destructive. You look sideways too often. You measure your chapter 1 against someone else's chapter 10. You see their speed, their results, their confidence, their progress, and then turn your own path into a reason for self-disrespect. That does not sharpen you. It weakens you. Because comparison steals attention from the only life you can actually build. Your own. It turns your focus outward when it should be directed inward. It makes you emotional about someone else's timeline instead of disciplined about your own. And the more you compare, the more you drift. The more you drift, the less you build. The third driver is emotional obedience, not emotion itself. Emotional obedience, that is the hidden enemy. You feel fear, so you pull back. You feel frustration, so you react. You feel sadness, so you lose rhythm. You feel doubt, so you delay. That is how reactive lives are formed. Not always through dramatic collapse, but through 1,000 small surrenders to temporary feelings. People say they know what they should do. Fine. Knowledge is not the issue. Emotional obedience is. They keep letting a passing feeling make a permanent decision. They keep handing the wheel to whatever mood shows up first. Then they wonder why nothing stays stable. How could it? When every emotion gets a vote, the fourth driver is environment. Your environment has been training you more than you notice and more than you respect. What you watch, what you listen to, who you stay around, what fills your room, what fills your phone, what fills your mind first thing in the morning and last thing at night. None of that is neutral. If your daily inputs are full of noise, gossip, complaint, distraction, mockery, and weakness, do not be shocked when your inner world starts sounding the same. If the people around you normalize low standards, quitting negativity, and emotional chaos, do not be surprised when your own standards begin to soften. Environment is not a small factor. It is silent training. It programs you while you are busy thinking nothing important is happening. And underneath all of it sits self-doubt, the whisper, the corrosion, the quiet voice that says maybe you are not enough. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe you always ruin things. Maybe you should stay small. Self-doubt does not always scream. Sometimes it sounds reasonable. Sometimes it sounds careful. Sometimes it sounds mature. But the effect is the same. It weakens action. It dilutes commitment. It makes you half-step through life. It keeps your standards low enough to avoid risk and high enough to keep you disappointed. That is a miserable way to live. And many people live there for years without realizing that self-doubt has become the hidden manager of their decisions. So what has been running your life? Old failure, comparison, emotional obedience, toxic input, weak environment, silent self-doubt. That is the cluster. That is the system of interference. That is why your life has felt divided. One part of you wants more. Another part keeps dragging you backward. One part sees what is possible. Another part keeps rehearsing what went wrong. One part wants to rise. Another part has been trained to retreat. This is the real battlefield. Not outside first, inside first. And this is where your power begins. Not when you feel good, not when life becomes easy, not when everyone supports you. Your power begins when you finally see clearly what has been controlling you. Because once you can name the forces, you can fight them. Once you can identify the hidden enemies, you can interrupt them. Once you stop calling the drift normal, you can start taking command. But first, you must admit something without drama and without self-pity. You have not really been in full control. Not yet. Too many outside voices have had access. Too many old thoughts have had authority. Too many temporary emotions have been treated like commands. That ends when you decide it ends. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now. Because the first step in taking your life back is seeing that it has already been partially taken. The second step is refusing to let that continue. You do not need another excuse. You do not need another soft explanation. You need control, real control. And that control will not come from wishful thinking. It will come from cutting the forces that have been poisoning your mind one by one, starting with the first one, what you keep feeding it every single day. Chapter 3. Change what you feed your mind. If you do not decide what enters your mind, life will decide it for you. And life is not careful with your future. It will fill your head with noise, fear, comparison, distraction, complaint, and mental junk. If you stay passive long enough, that is the truth. Your mind is being fed every day, whether you control the menu or not. The question is simple. Are you feeding it strength, or are you feeding it weakness? Are you building clarity, or are you building confusion? Because make no mistake, random mental input is not random in its effect. It becomes your inner atmosphere. It becomes the quality of your thinking. It becomes the tone of your emotions. It becomes the direction of your actions. Then, people wonder why they feel scattered, tired, negative, and weak. What did you think was going to happen after giving your attention away all day to garbage that was never designed to make you stronger? Most people treat mental input as if it does not matter. They think it is harmless. Just a few hours of scrolling, just a little gossip, just some bad news, just some complaining, just some empty content to fill the silence. But every repeated input leaves residue. Every repeated message plants something. Every repeated exposure trains your nervous system to expect more of the same. If you keep feeding your mind panic, you start thinking in panic. If you keep feeding it complaint, you start speaking in complaint. If you keep feeding it distraction, you start losing the ability to stay with hard things. That is how weakness grows. Quietly, gradually, daily, not always through collapse, often through contamination. So stop and audit your mental diet. Be honest. What are you giving your head every morning? What is the first thing that enters your mind after you wake up? Your mission or someone else's noise? Your standards or somebody else's chaos? Do you reach for your phone before you reach for direction? Do you let social media, bad news, shallow content, and random people fill your head before you have even taken control of your day? Then why are you surprised that your thinking feels weak by noon? Why are you surprised that focus feels hard? Why are you surprised that negativity keeps showing up so easily? You are not thinking in a vacuum. You are thinking from what you keep consuming. That is the hidden enemy in this chapter. Random mental input. Not just bad content. Random content. Unchosen content. Unguarded content. The kind that slips in because you never set a standard for what deserves access to your mind. That is dangerous because a random mind never becomes a strong mind. A random mind becomes a reactive mind, a distracted mind, a polluted mind. And a polluted mind cannot lead a powerful life. If you want a stronger life, you need to change what you feed your mind. Not someday, not after one more breakdown, not after one more wasted month. Now. Replace random input with intentional input. Replace poison with proof. Replace passive consumption with active construction. Read something that sharpens you. Listen to something that strengthens you. Write down your standards. Review your goals. Give your mind material that forces it upward instead of letting the world drag it downward. This is not about becoming fake positive. It is about refusing to let garbage become your normal. Strong people do not protect their attention because they are fragile. They protect it because attention is power. They know the quality of their focus shapes the quality of their life. Weak people hand their attention away all day and then wonder why they feel mentally bankrupt at night. Which one have you been? Which one are you going to be now? Because this will not fix itself. The world is not going to suddenly start feeding you what makes you stronger. You have to take responsibility for that. You have to become selective, deliberate, harder to poison. You also need a daily system, not just a vague desire to improve. Morning matters. The first input matters. Start the day with something that strengthens you before the world gets a chance to weaken you. Read 10 pages, write 1 page, review 1 mission, sit in silence for a few minutes and point your mind before the noise begins. During the day, cut what drags you down. Cut the mindless checking. Cut the empty scrolling. Cut the weak conversations that leave residue in your head. At the end of the day, close with reflection instead of more noise. What did you learn? What did you do right? What needs to improve tomorrow? Train the mind at the edges of the day and the middle becomes easier to defend. But do not hide behind learning. Consuming strong ideas without applying them is still weakness in better clothing. If you read something powerful today, use it today. If you hear something sharp, act on it before the day ends. If you learn about standards, raise one. If you learn about focus, remove 1 distraction. If you learn about discipline, keep 1 promise. Action seals the lesson. Action is what turns input into identity. And yes, there will be days when you slip. Days when you waste attention. Days when your mind gets noisy again. Fine. Correct it quickly. Do not turn 1 careless hour into a careless week. Do not turn 1 weak day into a weak identity. Missing once is not the danger. Normalizing weakness is. That is where people lose. They do not just make mistakes. They start giving those mistakes a permanent seat in their life. So stop being casual with your inner diet. Your future depends on what your mind consumes consistently. Feed it fear and you will act small. Feed it distraction and you will drift. Feed it strength and you will start building differently. Feed it standards and you will start living differently. Change what you feed your mind and you begin changing the entire quality of your inner world. But clean input alone will not save you if your past still has permission to define who you are. Chapter 4. Let the past be a lesson, not an identity. The biggest mistake is not that you failed before. The biggest mistake is that you are still living as if that failure is the truest picture of who you are. That is where the real damage begins, not in the event itself, but in the identity you build around it afterward. One setback happens, one loss happens, one humiliation happens, one season goes wrong. That is life. But then, many people make the second mistake, the more dangerous mistake. They turn the wound into a definition. They say, I failed, so maybe I am a failure. I broke once, so maybe I cannot be trusted. I lost before, so maybe losing is what I do. That is not self-awareness. That is surrender. That is yesterday reaching into today and trying to write tomorrow for you. This is how the past steals energy from the present. Through replay, through shame, through avoidance, through fear of repeating the same pain. You replay old moments until they still feel alive. You carry shame until it starts sounding like truth. You avoid trying again because you do not want to lose twice. You hold back because you are afraid life will expose you the same way again. That is how people get trapped. Not because they have no future, but because they keep giving their energy to what is already over. The event ended, the moment passed, but the self-judgment stayed. And once that judgment stays long enough, it starts interfering with everything new. You stop trying with full force. You stop trusting your movement. You stop taking clean risks. You start designing your life around not getting hurt again instead of around becoming stronger. That is a weak way to live. That is fear pretending to be wisdom. That is shame-based identity. And that is the hidden enemy of this chapter. Not just the past itself, not just memory, but the habit of taking pain and turning it into a permanent name for yourself. So here is the right mechanism. The past is data, not a sentence. It is information, not identity. It is a lesson, not a life definition. Keep the fact, drop the label, keep the lesson, drop the shame, keep the instruction, drop the self-condemnation. That is how strong people use pain. They do not deny it. They do not romanticize it. They do not pretend it never happened. They face it directly. They take the truth from it, but they refuse to let the event become the final portrait of who they are. Weak thinking says this happened, so this must be me. Strong thinking says this happened, so I need to learn. Weak thinking kneels to the past. Strong thinking extracts value from it. Weak thinking keeps reopening the wound. Strong thinking turns the wound into training material. Which one are you going to be? Because you cannot build a powerful future while still introducing yourself to yourself through your worst moments. You need a cleaner way to reinterpret the past. Use this. Ask yourself what happened. Not dramatically, clearly. Then ask, what did it teach me? What pattern did it expose? What weakness did it reveal? What standard was missing? Then say the sentence that breaks the old contract. I will not call this who I am anymore. I will call it what I needed to learn. I will use it as instruction. I will use it as proof of what must change. That is how you take power back. Not by denying the event, but by changing the meaning you keep attaching to it. Stop asking, what does this say about my worth? Ask, what does this require me to improve? That is the stronger question. That is the cleaner question. That is the question that opens the future instead of chaining you to the past. Because once you ask the right question, you stop replaying pain for identity and start using pain for direction. And do not wait until you feel perfectly healed before you move again. Movement is part of healing. Acting differently is how the old identity loses force. Keeping one promise now weakens the story that says you always break. Showing courage now weakens the story that says you always retreat. Building discipline now weakens the story that says you are not that kind of person. This is how the past loses control, not through time alone, through new evidence, through present action, through repeated refusal to keep calling old pain your name. Yesterday can teach you. It does not get to own you. Learn the lesson. Drop the shame. Step forward clean. Use the past as training material, not as your identity. And once you stop obeying yesterday, you will see the next trap more clearly. Because even if the past no longer owns you, you will still stay weak if your worth keeps depending on other people's timeline. Chapter 5. Stop comparing. Start building. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to make a person emotionally weak and strategically useless. It steals your peace. It steals your focus. It steals your respect for your own path. And the worst part is that it often looks harmless. Sometimes it even looks motivating. But most of the time it is not motivation. It is corrosion. It is your mind becoming obsessed with someone else's life while neglecting your own. It is your energy being pulled sideways when it should be moving forward. That is the hidden enemy. In this chapter, the borrowed scoreboard. A scoreboard that was never yours, but that you keep using to judge your value anyway. Look at what comparison does. It takes another person's visible result and turns it into a private attack on your worth. You see their progress and feel behind. You see their confidence and start doubting your own. You see their speed and begin disrespecting your process. But what exactly are you comparing their surface to your full struggle? Their highlight to your invisible work? Their current chapter to your unfinished chapter? That is not an honest comparison. That is a rigged mental game designed to make you feel late. And once you feel late, you rush. Once you rush, you lose patience. Once you lose patience, you lose discipline. Then you start abandoning your process because you are too busy reacting to someone else's pace. That is why comparison is not just painful. It is weakening. It does not only damage emotion, it damages execution. It makes you emotional about timelines when you should be loyal to the work. It turns you into a watcher when you should be a builder. You need to remember something simple and hard. Everyone is not starting from the same place. Everyone is not carrying the same history. Everyone is not facing the same obstacles. Everyone is not growing on the same schedule. Some people had support early. Some did not. Some had resources. Some had to fight for every inch. Some bloom fast. Some build deep before they rise. So why are you using another person's path as proof that yours is wrong? Why are you using someone else's timeline to decide how much respect you should have for your own effort? That is weakness. Stop it. The only comparison that serves you is this one: who are you becoming compared to who you used to be? That is the standard. Not them, not the internet, not the loudest person in the room, not the cleanest image you saw today. You against yesterday. You against last month. You against the version of yourself that used to quit earlier, drift more, and think weaker. That is the only scoreboard that keeps your mind clean. That is the only measurement that feeds progress instead of insecurity. Have you become harder to distract good? That matters. Have you become less reactive good? That matters too. Have you kept more promises to yourself than before? That matters. Have you become harder to break, harder to discourage, harder to pull off your path? That matters more than anyone else's speed ever will. Because your life will not change by admiring someone else's growth. It will change by building your own. This is where many people lose years. They spend so much time watching that they never go deep. They become obsessed with outcomes, appearances, and visible proof while neglecting the process that actually creates strength. They want visible growth without invisible discipline. They want confidence without evidence. They want results without repetition. That is not how it works. Strong lives are built from the inside out. Quietly first, repeatedly first, consistently first. You do not become powerful by winning the comparison game. You become powerful by becoming difficult to stop. So stop watching everybody else so closely. Stop turning someone else's success into a reason to feel weak. Their win is not your loss. Their speed is not your sentence. Their path is not your command. Your job is not to keep emotional score. Your job is to build. Build your habits. Build your focus. Build your standards. Build your mind. Build your body of evidence. Build a life you can respect. And protect your attention, because comparison often starts before the feeling starts. It begins with exposure. Too much scrolling, too much observing, too much consuming of other people's lives as if that will somehow improve your own. It will not. It will only increase mental noise and lower emotional stability. If certain spaces make you feel smaller, cut back. If certain voices trigger insecurity instead of action, step away. If certain patterns pull your eyes away from your own work, return your focus immediately. That is strength. Not pretending comparison does not affect you, but managing your environment so it has less power over you. And when comparison hits, answer it the right way. Not with self-pity, not with panic, not with fake confidence. Answer it with work. Someone is ahead. Fine. Build anyway. Someone is stronger. Fine. Train anyway. Someone is further along. Fine. Stay loyal to your process anyway. The goal is not to outfeel comparison. The goal is to outwork its effect on your behavior. Feel the sting if it comes, then go back to your lane. Go back to your assignment. Go back to your standards. There is no dignity in living by a borrowed scoreboard. There is no power in envying people while neglecting your own path. There is no future in measuring yourself against lives that are not carrying your exact battle. You are here to build something real. And real things take time. Seeds do not become trees overnight. Foundations are laid before houses stand. Strength grows before it becomes obvious. Your job is not to panic in the invisible stage. Your job is to remain faithful there. So stop comparing. Start building. Stop looking sideways for proof that you are enough. Start moving forward in ways that make you undeniable. Start earning self-respect through action, not emotional measurement. The more you build, the less comparison owns you. The more evidence you create, the less outside noise can shake you. And once you stop feeding the mind poison, stop obeying the past, and stop measuring yourself against everyone else, you are finally ready to build something stronger than impulse. You are ready to build a mind that can actually lead you. Chapter 6. Decide for real. Up to this point, you have been clearing what has been poisoning you. You have been cutting the noise. You have been cutting the past. You have been cutting comparison. Good. But clearing weakness is not the same as building command. Removing what drags you down is not the same as becoming someone who can lead himself. That is where this chapter begins. Because sooner or later every person reaches the same wall. Not a wall of talent, not a wall of potential, a wall of decision. You keep starting and stopping because you have not decided for real. That is the truth. You entertained the change. You liked the idea. You admired the picture of the stronger life. But you did not lock it in. You did not close the back door. You did not kill the part of you that still wanted an easy way out. And when a decision is weak, your follow-through will be weak too. Weak decisions create fragile action. Fragile action collapses the moment life pushes back. Most people live in the language of maybe. Maybe I will change. Maybe I will get serious. Maybe I will stop wasting my time. Maybe I will finally become the person I keep talking about. But maybe is a weak place to build a life from. Maybe leaks energy. Maybe leaves room for delay. Maybe leaves room for excuse. Maybe leaves room for emotional negotiation. That is why so many people stay trapped in the same cycle. Not because they never wanted more, but because they never made a clean decision that said, "This is happening, and I am not backing away when it becomes inconvenient." That is the hidden enemy in this chapter. Half commitment. Not failure, not lack of ability. Half commitment. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, one eye on the goal, one eye on the escape route. That is not seriousness. That is self-sabotage in better language. You need to understand what a real decision does. A real decision cuts noise. A real decision sharpens focus. A real decision stops the endless inner debate and starts moving energy in one direction. Before the decision, your mind is scattered. After the decision, your mind starts organizing itself around the mission. Before the decision, you ask whether you feel like doing the work. After the decision, the question changes. Now you ask what must be done next. That is power. That is why a real decision changes more than mood. It changes structure. It changes identity. It changes what you tolerate from yourself. It changes how much negotiating you allow. And this is where most people fail. They confuse wanting with deciding. They think that because they feel strongly for a moment they have committed. No. Wanting is cheap. Everybody wants the result. Weak people want results all day. Strong people decide to carry the cost. That is the difference. A real decision means you choose the goal and accept the price attached to it. Both. Not one without the other. If you want a stronger mind, you accept discomfort. If you want a better life, you accept repetition. If you want consistency, you accept that many days will not feel exciting. That is what a real decision sounds like. I know the cost and I am still going. Not, I hope this works. Not, I will try for a while. Not, I will stay with it if the mood stays high. Look at your pattern honestly. How many times have you started hard and then softened the moment things became boring? How many times have you spoken like a committed person while secretly protecting comfort? How many times have you said you were serious while still keeping an internal exit plan? That is the poison. That is the hidden weakness. Because if you keep the exit open, your mind will use it the moment discomfort arrives. The moment you feel fear, the moment you feel tired, the moment results slow down, the moment the work asks more from you than your feelings want to give. That is why real decision requires something stronger than motivation. It requires removing softness from your standards. So decide what kind of person you are becoming. Decide what you are done tolerating. Decide what matters enough that you will keep showing up when the mood is gone. And once you decide, stop feeding yourself exit language. No more saying, I hope. No more saying, maybe. No more saying, let us see how it goes. Speak like a person who has chosen. Act like a person who has chosen. Structure your day like a person who has chosen. That is how identity starts to shift. You stop living like someone testing the waters and start living like someone who has already crossed the line. This does not mean doubt will disappear. It will not. It does not mean resistance will vanish. It will not. It means those things stop getting final authority. They can make the path harder, but they do not get to cancel the mission. That is the difference. Before, discomfort changed your behavior. Now, discomfort becomes part of the path you already accepted. That is maturity. That is self-command. That is how a stronger life begins to take shape. Your life is too important for trial mode living. You cannot build a powerful future on weak internal agreements. You cannot say you want control while still negotiating with every impulse. You cannot say you want change while still protecting your excuses. At some point, you have to stop admiring seriousness and become serious. At some point, you have to stop sampling discipline and decide to live under it. At some point, you have to shut the back door. So decide for real. Decide deeply. Decide clearly. Decide in a way that makes retreat harder than staying the course. Because that is where drifting ends. That is where your power starts becoming stable. But even a real decision will keep collapsing if emotion still gets the final vote. That is why the next step is unavoidable. You do not just need a decision that is real. You need a response system strong enough to protect that decision when pressure hits. Chapter 7. Control your response. Control your life. A real decision changes nothing if your emotions still get the final vote. Read that again in your mind. A real decision changes nothing if your emotions still get the final vote. You can decide to build. You can decide to change. You can decide to stop drifting. Good. But what happens when fear shows up? What happens when frustration spikes? What happens when pressure rises, someone pushes your buttons, life gets loud, and your nervous system starts screaming for relief? That is where lives split apart. Not at the level of intention, at the level of response. One person reacts and damages everything. Another person responds and protects the mission. One person hands the wheel to the first feeling that arrives. Another person feels the emotion, but keeps the wheel in his own hands. Which one are you becoming? Most people are not as powerless as they think. They are simply too obedient to emotion. That is the hidden enemy in this chapter, emotional obedience, not emotion itself. Emotion is normal. Emotion is human. Emotional obedience is the problem. That is when you let a temporary feeling make a permanent decision. That is when fear tells you to shrink and you obey. That is when anger tells you to speak recklessly and you obey. That is when frustration tells you to break rhythm and you obey. That is when sadness tells you to disappear and you obey. This is how unstable lives are built. Not always through one big disaster, often through 1,000 small surrenders to passing inner weather. Think about how many times this has cost you. Fear made you pull back from the thing that would have made you stronger. Anger made you say something that damaged trust. Frustration made you abandon your structure. Doubt made you delay the work again. Pressure made you choose short-term relief over long-term respect. These are not small moments. They are direction-setting moments. Because every time you obey emotion too quickly, you teach your mind that feeling is command. That is a dangerous lesson to keep repeating. You need to separate two things clearly. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Reaction is fast, emotional, and impulsive. Response is slower, clearer, and directed. Reaction is what happens when your habits run you. Response is what happens when your standards run you. Reaction belongs to the old system. Response belongs to the trained one. And if you want a life that holds under pressure, you cannot keep living on automatic every time something hits your nervous system. So what do strong people do? They create a gap. That gap is one of the most powerful things you can build. The gap between feeling and action. The gap between trigger and decision. The gap where self-command lives. Without that gap, emotion drives everything. With that gap, you start recovering authority over your behavior. It may only be a few seconds at first. Fine. A few seconds is enough to save a life from years of repeated damage if you use it correctly. When pressure hits, follow this sequence. Stop. Step back. Think. Then act. Stop the automatic reaction before it becomes behavior. Step back and create distance even if it is only inside your own mind. Think clearly about what is actually happening, what matters most, and what response protects your future, instead of simply relieving the moment. Then act with intention, not with panic, not with ego, not with wounded pride. With intention. That is the system. That is the bridge from reactivity to self-command. This is not softness. This is not hesitation. This is control. People who react fast often look strong for 1 second, but they usually leave damage behind them. People who respond with thought may look quieter in the moment, but they keep their power. They do not let every outside event enter their inner world and start rearranging the furniture. They stay harder to shake, harder to manipulate, harder to provoke into self-sabotage. That is strength, real strength. And this is where high-performance thinking becomes practical. High-performance thinking is not fake positivity. It is not pretending nothing is wrong. It is trained focus. It is the habit of directing the mind toward what can still be done, instead of drowning in what cannot be changed. It asks better questions. What is in my control? What is the next right move? What matters most right now? What response keeps me aligned with the person I am trying to become? That is not natural for an untrained mind. It is built, repeatedly, intentionally, under pressure. When you train this way, something important starts happening. Fear still comes, but it stops ruling you. Anger still rises, but it stops using your mouth like a weapon. Pressure still hits, but it stops turning you into chaos. You begin to feel emotion without surrendering your standards to it. That is a major shift. That is the difference between having emotions and being led by them. One is human, the other is dangerous. Do not misunderstand the goal. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to become governed from within, led by principle instead of impulse. That is what people mean when they talk about calm strength. Not that nothing touches you, but that what touches you no longer owns you. Not that life stops testing you, but that the test stops deciding everything. And yes, you will still fail sometimes. You will still react too fast on some days. You will still say the wrong thing. You will still let frustration distort your perspective now and then. Fine. Correct it quickly. Learn from it. Ask what triggered the reaction and what response should have replaced it. Then train again. Do not turn one bad moment into permission for emotional chaos. The goal is not perfect control. The goal is increasing control. More awareness, more pause, more intention, more authority over yourself. Because once you control your response, you begin controlling the direction of your life. Your relationships improve because every feeling no longer gets to speak for you. Your discipline improves because emotion stops having veto power over your standards. Your confidence improves because you start trusting yourself under pressure. Your identity improves because you begin to see yourself as someone who can stay steady when life gets loud. That matters. It matters more than people realize. So the next time something hits you, do not ask only what you feel. Ask what kind of person you want to be in that moment. Do not ask only what would give quick relief. Ask what response earns your self-respect. Pause, breathe, step back, think clearly, then move with intention. That is how you stop being dragged through your own life. That is how you become harder to break. That is how you become harder to bait. That is how you become someone who can actually lead himself. And once you stop being ruled by reaction, the next question gets deeper. Who are you becoming through the way you now choose to live? That is where the next stage begins, not just with better responses, but with a new identity built from them. Chapter 8. Build a stronger identity. You do not change your life by chasing a stronger feeling. You change your life by becoming a stronger person. That is the truth. Most people never change for long because they try to improve behavior without rebuilding identity. They set a new goal, but they keep the same self-image. They start a new routine, but they keep speaking to themselves as if the old version is still the most honest version. They want stronger results, but they are still loyal to a weaker internal story. That is why they keep slipping back. That is why the change never holds. Because behavior can rise for a moment, but identity pulls everything back to what feels familiar. And if familiar still means weak, inconsistent, easily distracted, and easy to break, then no burst of motivation will save you for long. This is the hidden enemy in this chapter, your outdated self-image. Not just your habits, not just your mood, the old picture of who you think you are. The quiet story running underneath everything. I am the kind of person who always quits. I am the kind of person who cannot stay consistent. I am just not that strong. I always fall back. I always mess it up. That language is not harmless. It is programming. It is identity architecture. It builds the room you live in mentally, and then your behavior starts trying to match the room. That is why old identity is so dangerous. It does not just describe weakness. It protects weakness. It gives your bad patterns a place to live. It turns your history into your future before the future even gets a chance to begin. But that is the lie you have to break now. You are not your old script. You are not your worst moment. You are not your past inconsistency. You are not the label repeated over you by failure, fear, or other people. You are what you keep proving. That is where real identity comes from. Not from what you say during an emotional high, not from what you wish were true. From proof, from repetition, from behavior carried out often enough that the mind has to admit something has changed. That is why lasting change is built on evidence, not fake confidence, not slogans, evidence. This is also why change so often fails at the level of behavior alone. People do something strong once and call it luck. They keep one promise and still tell themselves they are unreliable. They stay disciplined for a few days and still secretly believe weakness is their truest form. That belief poisons everything. It makes progress feel temporary. It makes strength feel unnatural. It makes the old self feel honest and the new self feel fake. That has to end. Because if you keep treating your strongest actions like exceptions, your mind will never let the new identity take root. You need a stronger standard now. Stop asking whether you feel strong enough. Ask a better question. What would the stronger version of me do today? Would he keep the promise or break it? Would he do the work or delay it? Would he keep the standard or negotiate with comfort again? Would he stay under pressure or collapse into excuse? Ask the question, then obey the answer. Not once, repeatedly. That is how identity shifts, one vote at a time, one kept promise at a time, one hard action at a time. Every action is a vote. Every repeated action is a pattern. Every pattern becomes a reputation in your own mind. And once your mind begins to trust that you are serious, your behavior becomes harder to shake. This is where self-respect starts changing too. Self-respect does not grow from wishing you were better. It grows from evidence that you can trust yourself. When you do what you said you would do, self-respect grows. When you hold the line under pressure, self-respect grows. When you choose discipline over comfort, self-respect grows. When you return quickly after a slip instead of disappearing into shame, self-respect grows. That is the deeper shift. You stop begging yourself to believe in you and you start giving yourself proof that belief is deserved. And no, you do not need to become perfect to build a stronger identity. You need to become consistent enough that the new evidence starts outweighing the old story. That means when you fail, you correct fast. When you slip, you return fast. When the old voice says, "See, you are still the same," you answer it with action instead of self-pity. One bad day is not identity. One missed step is not identity. Repeated surrender is, so do not surrender. Adjust. Return. Rebuild the proof immediately. You also need to stop being loyal to the weak version of yourself just because it is familiar. Familiar is not always true. Familiar is often just repeated. The old identity feels believable because you practiced it longer. Fine. Then start practicing the new one longer. Make it harder to deny. Walk differently. Speak differently. Keep your word in smaller things. Show up differently. Handle pressure with more control. Hold your standards when no one is watching. These are not tiny moves. They are identity moves. They are the bricks of a new internal structure. And once that structure gets strong enough, your outer life begins to reflect it. So build a stronger identity now. Not when life gets easier. Not when you finally feel more ready. Now, decide who you are becoming. Then give your mind undeniable proof that this is who you are now. A person who follows through. A person who stays in control. A person who can be trusted by himself. A person who does not bow to old labels. A person who gets stronger under pressure instead of smaller. That identity is not built in one speech. It is built in daily evidence. Earn that evidence. Stack it. Defend it. Live in a way that makes the new story impossible to ignore. And remember this clearly, a stronger identity cannot survive inside an environment that keeps voting for your weaker self. That is why the next step matters so much. Chapter 9. Protect your energy and your standards. A stronger identity will not hold if your environment keeps feeding the weaker version of you. That is the truth. You can decide to grow. You can decide to raise your standards. You can decide to stop living like the old version of yourself. Good. But if the rooms around you keep rewarding distraction, low effort, emotional chaos, and weak thinking, your progress will keep fighting for air. That is why environment is not a side issue. It is not a soft issue. It is not optional. It is one of the biggest forces shaping what identity gets reinforced every day. And this is the hidden enemy in this chapter, the low-standard environment. Not just toxic people, the full atmosphere that quietly trains you toward weakness if you do not fight back. You do not live in isolation. The people around you shape you. The conversations around you shape you. The room you sit in shapes you. The content on your phone shapes you. The noise you normalize shapes you. The energy you keep around shapes you. That is reality. So if you are serious about becoming someone stronger, clearer, more disciplined, and harder to break, you must get serious about protecting your energy and your standards. Because identity does not live by words alone. It lives by reinforcement. It lives by what keeps getting repeated around you. And if the environment keeps voting for your weaker self, it becomes much harder to keep your stronger self alive. Stop pretending the environment is neutral. It is not. Environment is repeated suggestion. Environment is silent pressure. It teaches you what is normal, what is laughable, what is worth aiming for, and what is acceptable to tolerate. Spend enough time around people who laugh at discipline, and your own discipline starts softening. Spend enough time around people who complain instead of build, and your thinking gets heavier. Spend enough time around people who react emotionally to everything, and your nervous system starts expecting chaos. Spend enough time in messy, noisy, distracting spaces, and your standards start dropping without you even noticing. That is what bad environments do. They do not always attack you directly. Sometimes they simply keep making the weaker version of you easier to become. Pay attention to the after effect certain people and places leave on you. That is where the truth shows up. After being around them, do you feel stronger or smaller? Clearer or more confused? More disciplined or more careless? More focused or more drained? That feeling matters because energy is not just emotion. Energy is your ability to direct thought, maintain standards, and stay aligned with who you are trying to become. If something consistently drains that it is not neutral, it is a cost. And too many people keep paying that cost because they are afraid to become more selective about what gets access to them. Let us be honest about something else. Some people do not want you stronger. Some do not want you clearer. Some do not want your standards to rise because your growth exposes their comfort. They were fine with you when you drifted. They were fine with you when you made excuses. They were fine with you when you played small enough to keep everybody comfortable. But the moment you get serious, the moment you protect your time, the moment you stop laughing at your own potential, they get uncomfortable. Why? Because your discipline becomes a mirror. Your progress becomes a reminder. Your refusal to stay weak forces them to face what they keep avoiding in themselves. So, what do? They mock. They discourage. They question. They invite you back into old patterns. They call it harmless. It is not harmless. It is interference. This is why you must become more selective. Not cruel. Selective. Not arrogant. Clear. You need to know who strengthens you and who slowly lowers your ceiling. You need to know which rooms make you sharper and which rooms make you sloppy. You need to know what kinds of conversations leave your standards intact and which tempt you back into weakness. Because if you do not choose your influences will choose your future. And do not reduce environment to just people. Your physical environment matters too. A clean room matters. A clear desk matters. A phone that is not full of poison matters. A workspace that makes focus easier matters. Silence matters. Order matters. Structure matters. Your environment is not only who you are near, it is also what you keep near. It is the visual and emotional atmosphere you repeatedly enter. Does your space support concentration or scatter it? Does it support reflection or constant stimulation? Does it reinforce standards or invite drift? Ask those questions honestly. Your room may be voting for your future more than you realize. So, protect your energy with action. Reduce exposure to voices that constantly weaken you. Spend less time in spaces that feed distraction, gossip, and emotional chaos. Stop giving everyone unlimited access to your attention. Access is earned. Proximity is earned. Influence should be earned too. Just because something has been around you for a long time does not mean it deserves permanent authority over your atmosphere. Time is not the same as alignment. Familiarity is not the same as health. This will require courage. Sometimes protecting your energy means saying no more often. Sometimes it means stepping back from people you used to be available to all the time. Sometimes it means cleaning your room, tightening your routine, changing your inputs, and becoming less explainable to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Fine, let them misunderstand. Better to be misunderstood while growing than understood while staying weak. Better to protect your future than perform comfort for people who do not have to live your life. And remember this clearly. Protecting your energy is not selfish in the weak sense. It is responsible. You cannot build a strong mind in a state of constant unnecessary depletion. You cannot hold a high standard while living inside low-standard influence all day. You cannot keep becoming the person you respect if you keep allowing the wrong people, the wrong spaces, and the wrong patterns to vote against that person every single day. At some point, responsibility requires separation. At some point, growth requires selection. At some point, your future must matter more than everyone else's opinion about your boundaries. So raise the filter, tighten the circle, clean the space, guard the standard. Ask yourself what in your life is feeding strength and what is feeding weakness. Then act on the answer. Not emotionally, decisively. Because the stronger identity you are building needs protection. It needs air. It needs alignment. It needs an environment that does not keep dragging it back into survival mode. Protect your energy and your standards, and the new version of you starts to hold for real, not for a mood, not for a burst, for real. And once you are no longer feeding the old identity, obeying the old mind, or living inside the wrong environment, one final test remains. Chapter 10. Keep going until your life changes. The most dangerous stage of any transformation is not the beginning. It is not the first mistake. It is not even the first setback. The most dangerous stage is the one almost nobody talks about enough. The stage where you are doing the work, but the result has not shown up yet. That is where people break. That is where doubt gets louder. That is where old patterns start sounding intelligent again. That is where the mind whispers, maybe this is not working. Maybe I am wasting my time. Maybe I should go back to what is easier, what is familiar, what asks less of me. That is the hidden enemy in this chapter. Impatience with invisible progress. Not failure, not lack of ability. Impatience, the inability to stay loyal when the reward is delayed. And if you do not understand that enemy, it will steal years from you. Because progress does not always look like progress when you are living inside it. Sometimes the root is growing before the tree can be seen. Sometimes the foundation is being laid before the house can stand. Sometimes your mind is getting stronger in ways your emotions cannot measure yet. If you do not understand that you will quit in the invisible stage, and if you quit in the invisible stage, you will never stay long enough to see what your consistency was actually building. Too many people expect transformation to pay fast. They want proof right away, reassurance right away, visible reward right away. But life does not run on your emotional timeline. Growth has a delay, strength has a delay, identity has a delay, results have a delay. The problem is not that progress is absent. The problem is that the old mind wants visible proof before it agrees to keep going. That is weakness. That is short-term thinking. That is the old system trying to pull you back under the rule of feeling. Do not let it. Do not demand immediate applause from every good decision. Some decisions pay later. Some choices are building you in silence. Some seasons are not for showing. They are for strengthening. They are for becoming the kind of person who does not need constant emotional payment in order to remain loyal to the work. This is where winning separates itself from wishing. Many people do not fail because the path was wrong. They fail because the reward came slower than their discouragement. They mistake silence for failure. They mistake slow growth for no growth. They mistake emotional fatigue for proof that the mission is wrong. But none of that is true. Sometimes you are one disciplined month away. Sometimes one hard season away. Sometimes the breakthrough is hidden behind one more stretch of invisible work, one more stretch of private standards, one more stretch of showing up without applause. Can you do that? Can you keep moving when nobody claps yet? Can you keep building when the result is still underground? Can you remain loyal when life has not rewarded you on schedule? That is the test. That is where your real identity gets exposed. Anybody can move when the path feels exciting. Anybody can work when the feedback is immediate. Anybody can believe for a moment when things are going well. But can you stay with the process when it gets quiet? Can you stay with the work when no one notices? Can you keep your standards when life gives you no applause? That is maturity. That is strength. That is the point where discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. Because the person who wins is not the person who never feels tired, never doubts, never gets discouraged. The person who wins is the person who refuses to let those feelings become final decisions. Continuing does not mean moving perfectly. It does not mean never struggling. It means refusing to let the struggle decide the outcome. You may feel tired. Keep going. You may feel uncertain. Keep going. You may feel tempted to return to old habits. Keep going. You may have a bad day, a bad week, even a bad stretch. Fine. Correct. Regroup. Continue. The person who wins is not the one who never gets hit. The person who wins is the one who does not stay down after getting hit. That is why this final stage matters so much. It is not just about persistence as behavior. It is about persistence as identity. Look at what you have built already if you have truly walked through the earlier stages. You know what you feed your mind now. You know how to stop obeying the past. You know how to stop using other people as your scoreboard. You know how to decide for real. You know how to control your response. You know how to build a stronger identity. You know how to protect your energy and your standards. Good. Now prove that all of that was not just theory. Prove it by continuing. Prove it by staying in motion after motivation dies. Prove it by remaining loyal after the excitement fades. Prove it by making persistence part of your self-respect. There will be days when the old self tries to negotiate. It will say, "You have done enough." It will say, "Take the easier road." It will say, "One step backward will not matter." It will say, "You can restart later." Listen carefully. That voice is not wisdom. It is the old life asking for access again. Do not give it access. Do not reopen doors you fought to close. Do not return to patterns that once made you weak. You have come too far for that. You have built too much for that. And even if the outside result is not visible yet, the inside result has already begun. You are more aware now, more deliberate now, more disciplined now, harder to distract now, harder to break now, more capable of leading yourself now. That matters a lot. Do not insult that progress just because it has not fully announced itself in public yet. And now comes the final lock, the final refusal to live half-committed. You must decide that you will win, not hope, not wish, not try. Decide. Decide in the deepest part of yourself that quitting is no longer an identity you are available for. Decide that setbacks will not be your conclusion. Decide that delay will not make you betray the work. Decide that difficulty will not get to rename you. When you say, "I will win this," cannot be empty language. It must mean I will keep showing up until the result catches up with the standard I have chosen. It must mean I do not need this to be easy, but I do need myself to keep moving. It must mean surrender is no longer an option I negotiate with. That is the real power of this final decision. It is not a slogan. It is identity. It is a vow. It is the moment you stop asking whether success will happen and start living like the person who will remain until it does. Winning begins there, before the applause, before the visible proof, before the world can see it. It begins as a decision at the level of identity. I am the kind of person who continues. I am the kind of person who stays in the fight. I am the kind of person who does not hand the future back to fear just because the road got longer than expected. That is who you must become now. Not a person chasing emotional highs, but a person locked in on direction. Not a person who needs constant validation, but a person who knows what he is building and remains loyal to it. Not a person who crumbles in the quiet, but a person who gets stronger there. So keep going until your life changes. Keep going until your mind becomes harder than your excuses. Keep going until your standards feel normal. Keep going until the old identity has no place left to stand. Keep going until your actions become undeniable evidence of the person you said you would become. Keep going until your future starts reflecting the discipline you practiced in private. Keep going until the result arrives. And even then, keep going. Because this was never just about one result. It was about becoming someone who can be trusted with a better life. Someone who can hold the line. Someone who can lead himself. Someone who can rise, stay up, and move forward with force. From this point on, your life does not wait for better conditions. It moves under a stronger identity. You keep going. You keep building. You keep showing up until the result has no choice but to appear. Your life does not change by chance. It changes when you change what has been ruling your mind. That is the truth at the center of this entire journey. You were never meant to live under the control of untrained thoughts. Old labels, emotional obedience, weak standards, and delayed surrender. You were meant to take the wheel back. That is what this journey has been about from the beginning, seeing the real problem, reclaiming control, building a new system, becoming a stronger identity, then staying with that identity long enough for your life to reflect it. You have seen the path clearly now. First, you stopped calling yourself broken and started naming the problem for what it really was, an untrained mind. Then you exposed what had been running your life in the dark. Then you changed what you feed. Your mind stopped letting the past define you and stopped measuring yourself against everybody else. Then you learned to decide for real and to control your response instead of obeying every passing feeling. Then you rebuilt your identity through proof and protected it through environment, energy, and standards. And finally, you reached the stage where everything gets tested. The stage where you keep going without immediate reward. The stage where you decide that winning is no longer a wish, but a way of living. So let this be the line. Let this be the day you stop letting your mind defeat you. No more living under old labels. No more handing the wheel to fear. No more negotiating with quitting. No more calling weakness your nature when it was only conditioning. No more acting like your past has final authority. No more drifting. No more half-commitment. From this point on, you live under a stronger standard. From this point on, you train your mind on purpose. From this point on, you act like the person you said you would become. Not sometimes. Not when it feels easy. Consistently. Decisively. Relentlessly. This is not the day everything becomes easy. This is the day you become harder to stop.